Good morning, students. This is Nandini. Today we will see the portrait of a lady written by Kushwant Singh. First, I shall read the paragraph, then I shall explain each and everything in this paragraph. Please follow me, students. My grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. People said that she had once been young and pretty and had even had a husband, but that was hard to believe. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban and loose fitting clothes. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. As for my grandmother, being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. She often told us of the game she used to play as a child that seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophet she used to tell us. First, we shall see the explanation of this paragraph, students. Kushwant Singh is the author. In this paragraph, we can see the bonding towards Kushwant Singh and his grandmom. In this lesson, the two main characters are grandmother and our author Kushwant Singh. Okay. My grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I have known her. So here the author would like to tell us, because he was seeing her old. So he could not remember her young age and all, because right from his younger, that is, he used to see her very old. People said that she had once been young and pretty, but Arthur is not at all ready to believe that. He used to see his grandfather's portrait. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest, and grandfather also, he always thinks, no, he will be having so many grandchildren, but not wife or sons. That was the thinking of our Arthur. Whenever grandmother, she used to tell the game she used to play as a child, Arthur, he was not ready to accept that. Okay. First paragraph, we can see the bonding. As a child, how he adored his grandma, that we had seen. Okay. Here now we shall see the meaning. Portrait. What do you mean by portrait? Drawing. Hard to believe. To accept something is true. What do you mean by wrinkles? Having lines or folds. Yes, old people used to see. Yes, graceful old age. Once if we become old, even we too get wrinkles. Yes, agree? Second paragraph. She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. Her face was a crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her, old, so terribly old, that she could not have grown older and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. She hobbled about the house in spotless white, with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stool, and the other telling the beads of her rosary. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. Yes, she was beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. Now we shall see the explanation of the second paragraph, students. She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. Usually, when you can see your grandmom, grandfather, slightly they bend their back. Her face was crisscross of wrinkles. What do you mean by crisscross? Yes, crisscross. Wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere? No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her. Because for the past many years he is seeing his grandma very old. Oh, so terribly old that she could not have grown older and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. For many years after, he used to see his grandmom like that. She could never have been pretty. Pretty, its outer appearance, but beautiful, that inner beauty. Yes, that soul's beauty it is. She hobbled about. What do you mean by hobbled about? What do you mean by hobbled? It is can't walk properly. Okay. Somewhat old people they walk with a slightly they can't walk straight like us, right? It is hobbled. She could never have been pretty, but she was very beautiful. She hobbled about the house in spotless white with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop, slightly balancing her, and always she used to pray. Even our grandmoms, they used to have tulsi mala, right, rosary. If you see Christians and Muslims, even they too, while praying rosary, they used to that beads, that mala. Yes, her silver locks, you should not think locks here. Her silver locks here, her grey hair, locks here, hair, were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face due to wrinkles. Even the lips face slightly changed, right? Puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayers. Always she used to pray, which you can't hear that, but always her lips moves. Yes, she was beautiful. Her soul was very beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity. What do you mean by serenity? Peace. Breathing peace and contentment. If you see her, yes, peaceful. So, in this paragraph, the author was explaining about his grandmother, her inner beauty. Now, I shall read the third paragraph, then we shall see the meaning. Yes? My grandmother and I were good friends My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for the school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing-song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. I listened because I loved her voice but never bothered to learn it. Then she would plastered with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen ink pot, and a red pen, tie them all in a bundle and hand it to me. After a breakfast of a thick stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. She carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs. Now we shall see the explanation, students. My grandmother and I were very good friends. While shifting to city, Arthur's parents they left Arthur with his grandmom, and we were constantly ready. That is, we were constantly together. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for the school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous voice. That is, her intention was the author should by heart the shlokas, but the author he used to listen because he loves her voice, but not bothered to learn and all. Then she would fetch me wooden slate. In those days, slate, chalk, yellow chalk we used to write, and a tiny earthen ink pot and a red pen, tie them in all in a bundle and hand it to me. So, a breakfast, a stale, what do you mean by stale? It's not fresh, okay? Chapati along with little butter and sugar spread on it. They went to school. She carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs to feed. My grandmother always she used to feed chapatis to the stray dogs. Usually in villages and all you might have observed people they used to feed cows, dogs, birds. Similarly, grandma she used to feed the stray dogs. To feed the stray dogs, she used to carry more chapatis. Okay. There's any difficult words if you are finding here, please let me know. What do you mean by monotonous? Dull, boring, not so interesting. What do you mean by bothered? To be concerned. Bothered means to be concerned. What do you mean by fetch? To get. These are the difficult words here. Stale, not fresh, already I had told you. I should send the meaning separately, okay? My grandmother, now I am going to read the fourth paragraph and I shall explain everything word by word. I shall explain. My grandmother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple. The priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer, while the children sat in the rows on either side of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the prayer. In a chorus, my grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures. When we had both finished, we would walk back together. This time, the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. They followed us to our home growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. Always grandmother and grandson, they used to go to school together because the school was attached to the temple, and the priest, he taught us the alphabets and the morning prayer. While the children sat in the rows on either side of the veranda. What do you mean by veranda? Courtyard. Here, grandmother, she used to sit inside and she used to read the scriptures. What do you mean by the scriptures? Shlokas, the sacred writings. Yes. When we had both finished, we would walk back together. After the school is over, even along with grandson, grandma also, they walked together. This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. The dogs, they used to wait for the chapatis because every day grandmother, she used to feed the stray dogs. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting. What do you mean by growling? um, the sound made by the dogs. Yes, fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. Now I'm going to read the next paragraph. You please understand. Then, whatever difficult words, I shall explain you. When my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us. That was a turning point in our friendship. Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. I used to go to an English school in a motor bus. There was no dogs in the street, and she took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard of our city house. Now, a turning point in their life. You can see first the author, he used to spend his life in a village. Now, city life. Definitely, there will be a change. They were sharing the same room, but the thing is, a slight change. Now, grandmother, she is not coming along with her grandson because he used to go to school by school bus. How you are all coming to school, right? School bus. And here, the way of teaching English medium school. In English medium school, Christian prayers, not like village school, not attached with the temple. So here, no street dogs here, no stray dogs. Now grandmother, she started feeding sparrows. That is the only change here. Okay. Shall I explain the second paragraph then? As the years rolled by, we saw less of each other. For some time, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught. What the teacher had taught me. I would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, the world being round, etc. This made her unhappy. She could not help me with my lessons. She did not believe in the things they taught at this English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and the scriptures. One day, I announced that we were being given music lessons. She was very disturbed. To her, music has lived associations. It was the monopoly of harlots and beggars and not meant for gentlefolk. She said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval. She rarely talked to me after that. Now we shall see the meanings. Let me explain the meaning of this paragraph. As the years rolled by, We saw less of each other. They were sharing the same room, but for some time she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she used to ask me what the teacher had taught me, everything. And author used to share everything. English words, the little things of Western science and learning, law of gravity, Archimedes principle, everything, whatever he learned, he used to share. But grandma was not at all happy. Now she could not help the author with his lessons. She did not believe in the things they taught at English school and was distressed. Distressed means very upset. There was no teaching about God and the scriptures because our grandma usually they firmly believe in shlokas, the religious writings. One day I announced that we were being given music lessons. In those days, now see, you are all, there are many music competitions, music, singing, and that's a profession now, right? But in those days, for beggars, they will sing and they used to get begging. So, many gentle people, they never, that is, they don't want to learn music and all. In those days, I'm telling, but it's not now. It was the monopoly of heralds and beggars. That was the belief of the grandma, but not meant for gentlefolk. Noble people, they should not learn music. That was the belief of grandmother. She said nothing, but her silence, it showed, okay, grandma is not at all approving this. She rarely talked to me after that. Then after that, grandmother, she started speaking very less. I'm going to read the next paragraph. Is there any difficult words you are finding? Archimedes principle? What do you mean by Archimedes principle? Yes, you need to remember. Yeah. Rolled by, time passed, distressed, suffer from sorrow, leaved associations. Please underline indecent, gentlefolk. Please underline people of noble birth. Yes. Shall I read next paragraph? When I went up to university, I was given a room of my own. The common link of friendship was snapped. My grandmother accepted her seclusion with resignation. She rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel spinning and reciting prayers. Only in the afternoon she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows while she sat in the veranda breaking the bread into the little bits. Hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirpings. Some came and perched on her legs, other on her shoulders. Some even sat on her head. She smiled but never shooed them away. It used to be the happiest half hour of the day for her. Now Arthur, he started going to university and he was given a separate room of his own. Now the friendship was snapped. What do you mean by snapped? Break suddenly. My grandmother accepted her seclusion. What do you mean by seclusion? The state of being alone. And she accepted it with resignation, accepted her seclusion with resignation. That is, she accepted without any objection. Yeah. She rarely left her spinning wheel. What do you mean by spinning wheel? In those days, it's a handmade machine. Cotton to yarn. Yes, Mahatma Gandhi ji used to. Yes, spinning wheel. Khadi. In those days, as a hobby, old people they used to do this. Okay, cotton to yarn they used to do this. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel spinning and reciting prayers. In the afternoon, she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. While she sat in the veranda, breaking the bread into little bits, hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirpings. What do you mean by that? Sound made by small birds. Veritable bedlam of chirpings, sound made by small birds. Some came and perched on her legs, others on her shoulders, some even sat on her head. She smiled but never shooed them away. It used to be the happiest half hour of the day of her. Even you might have read in Bible that is Saint Francis of Assisi. When he comes, birds they used to come in flocks. They used to sit on his shoulder, everything. Only for good people, people with kind and noble heart, birds they know the sensitivity. Even here, it shows grandmother's greatness, her kindness. Sparrows they used to come and sit on her shoulders. She never shooed them away. Okay. In this paragraph, already I had explained the meaning. A spinning wheel, handmade machine, cotton to yarn. Okay, they used to. In olden days, they used to. Now we are not doing that. Then, veritable bedlam of chirping. It means sound made by small birds. When I decided to go abroad for further studies, I was sure my grandmother would be upset. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age, one could never tell. But my grandmother could. She was not even sentimental. She came to leave me at the railway station, but did not talk or show any emotion. Her lips moved in prayer. Her mind was lost in prayer. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. Silently, she kissed my forehead, and when I left, I cherished the moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us. Now, Arthur had decided to go abroad for further studies. Yeah, our passion, right? Even everyone we loved before Corona. But now we are very comfortable in India only, right? Even many Americans they started feeling India is more safer. I was sure my grandmother would be upset because grandmother she loves a lot. Yes, our author was loved by her a lot. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age one could never tell. But grandmother was not sentimental, no emotions. She very happily she came. It is without showing any emotion. She came to the railway station. She was praying. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. Silently she kissed on my forehead. And when I left, I cherished the moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us. Arthur always, that is what you mean by cherished? Hold something dear. The moist is wet. Sentimental here, an emotional feeling. Imprint is impression. Okay, these are the difficult words in this paragraph. You can understand the bonding here. And grandmother, she came and she kissed on his forehead. But that was not so. After 5 years, I came back home and was met by her at the station. She did not look a day older. She still had no time for words, and while she clasped me in her arms, I could hear her reciting her prayers. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom she fed longer and with frivolous remarks. Um, Here, after 5 years, author came back. She did not look a day old. She looked same. She had no time for words. She clasped me, means that she held author tightly in her arms. I could hear her reciting her prayers. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom she fed longer, and with frivolous rebukes, means when the birds sitting on the shoulders and all, she used to gently scold the birds. Frivolous rebuke, a light-hearted scolding, not from the heart. Okay. In the evening, a change came over her. She did not pray. She collected the women of the neighborhood, got an old drum, and started to sing. For several hours, she thumped the sagging skins of the dilapidated drum and sang of the homecoming of warriors. We had to persuade her to stop to avoid overstraining. That was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. That evening, a strange thing happened. She was not at all praying. She started, that is, neighborhood ladies, they came and she started singing songs. In those days, even during marriage and all, dole, we used to write, that is, women. Dole, along with singing, she started singing happily, that is, warriors, the homecoming warriors song she was singing. The next morning, she was taken ill. The only thing is, that day only Arthur saw she was not praying. The next morning she was taken ill. It was a mild fever, and the doctor told us that it would go. But my grandmother thought differently. She told us that her end was near. She said that since only a few hours before the close of her last chapter of her life, she had omitted to pray. She was not going to waste any more time talking to us. Though the doctor, he was telling, no, she will be recovering. But grandmother, very firmly, she told that, no, her end had come. Now she would like to pray and she don't want to waste her time in talking. We protested, but she ignored our protest. She lay peacefully in bed, praying and telling her beads. Even before we could suspect, her lips stopped moving, and the rosary fell down from her lifeless fingers. A peaceful pallor spread on her face, and we knew that she was dead. Family members? Now that is, she was not at all talking with anyone. She started praying and telling her beads, and her lips stopped moving, and the rosary fell down from her lifeless fingers, and they understood now she had passed away. We lifted her off the bed and, as is customary, laid her on the ground and covered her with a red shroud. After a few hours of mourning, we left her alone to make arrangements for her funeral. In the evening, we went to her room with a crude stretcher to take her to the cremator. The sun was setting, and had lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. We stopped halfway in the courtyard, all over the veranda and in her room, right up to where she lay dead, and the stiff, wrapped in the red shroud, thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. There was no chirping. We felt sorry for the birds, and my mother fetched some bread for them. She broke it into little crumbs, the way my grandmother used to, and threw it to them. The sparrows took no notice of the bread. When we carried my grandmother's corpse off, they flew away quietly. Next morning, the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. Now you see, the kind-hearted lady, when she died, thousands of sparrows, they came to pay the tribute. Yes, a peaceful parlor, a peaceful pallor spread on her face, a peaceful pallor, an unhealthy pale appearance. What do you mean by customary? A traditional? A red shroud, cloth to cover the dead body, and corpse, dead body. Mother, she was trying to feed the sparrows, but no birds. They were not at all ready to take those breadcrumbs. Even they are all, even birds, they are very sensitive. Now they came to understand. Yes, the kind-hearted lady who used to feed, now she was no more. Even birds, they understood. When they carried grandmother's corpse off, the sparrows flew away quietly. Next morning, the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. Birds, they did not take the breadcrumbs. That is, this lesson is over. The three phases of the author's relationship with his grandmother before he left the country to study abroad, and three reasons why the author's grandmother was disturbed when he started going to the city school. Three ways in which author's grandmother spent her days after he grew up. The odd way in which the author's grandmother behaved just before she died. The way in which the sparrows expressed their sorrow when the author's grandmother died. And these are the activities you can make or you can write. I will give you the notes, but you can try from your own. The author's grandmother was a religious person. What are the different ways in which we come to know this? Describe the changing relationship between the author and his grandmother. Did their feelings for each other change? Would you agree that the author's grandmother was a person strong in character? If yes, give instances that show this. Have you known someone like the author's grandmother? Do you feel the same sense of loss with regard to someone whom you have loved and lost? Which language do you think the author and his grandmother used while talking to each other? Which language do you use to take to elderly relatives in your family? Are you respecting your grandparents? How would you say a dilapidated drum in your language? Can you think of a song or a poem in your language that talks of homecoming? we shall do all the exercises given in this lesson, students. If you have any doubts, please ask me. And today's activity, I want you to write about your grandmother, your grandfather, their emotional bonding within you. I would like to know that. Thank you, students.